Silicon Valley HBO is a great parody of Silicon Valley in real life, but can its legal scenes help you in your real life as a startup or business owner? Let's react to them.
So, Richard Hendricks is here. There you are, Richard. So sorry these gentlemen have kept you waiting. So, here's the thing. I love what you did.
Shit, sorry. Well, really? No, that's yeah, no, here. It's Peter Gregory. Not sure how he got my number.
This is Richard.
I'll give you $3 million for it right now.
Gavin Belson just offered me $3 million for Pied Piper.
I'm prepared to give you $300,000.
Peter Gregory just offered me 300. Did you say 1,000?
For 10% of your company.
Okay, $4 million.
200,000. For 5%.
Huh? You just went down.
So what's going on here is an acquisition versus an investment offer. These are two very different kinds of offers.
No. You're still valued at $4 million, but you own 95% of a potential billion-dollar company. And not just that. I will help you build this company. I will introduce you to the people you need to know and provide the counsel that you need. I will take a small piece, but the company will belong to you, not Gavin Belson.
This is a good intro to the difference between Gavin Belson and Peter Gregory. Now, like I mentioned, these offers are two very different kinds of offers. Peter Gregory wants to invest in the company while Gavin Belson wants to acquire the company completely. There are very different ways in doing this for each category. So later on in this series, you see that Peter Gregory went to the convertible note. A convertible note is basically an IOU. It states that I'm going to give you this money, but it's actually a loan. But internally, I don't really want the loan back. What I actually want is that the next time you're raising money from a venture capitalist, the next financing round, then the value of the note, meaning the amount I paid for it, in this case, 200K, will then convert into shares. But when we get to that point, we'll talk about that. Other ways of doing this is through a safe. Safes have become very popular in the last kind of 5-10 years. They're very simple to do. In fact, a safe actually means simple agreement for equity. Safes have become popular. You can also do a regular stock purchase. That's another alternative. On the other side, with Gavin Belson's offer, when you think about an acquisition, what you're thinking of, they just buy the company. But there's an actual question as to what they're buying. Are they buying just the asset? If you think about it, Gavin wants the technology that Richard has created. That's actually what he wants. So one way he can actually do this is to purchase just that asset itself. They create an asset purchase agreement that states, I'm going to buy this technology and just this technology. The downside about that is that if you overlook anything, then you're screwed. If the asset you purchased is however connected to other things, maybe there are other APIs or other contracts they've signed with somebody else, and you don't scrutinize everything well enough to find all the other peripheral things that you need, you can end up in a situation where you have the main asset, but you lack something very vital that you need to make that asset work. That's the downside with those asset purchase agreements. Now, on the other side, you could acquire the company, but even then, you could buy the stock in the company, which is what the company actually is. You purchase 100% of the shares and it's yours. Usually you sign a stock purchase agreement for that. Very simple, works. The downside with that is you're also buying not just the assets that you want, but you can potentially be purchasing liabilities that the company has as well. So that's the downside with that. With the asset purchase, you only purchase exactly what you want. If there are other liabilities, you don't care about them. The third way of doing this is through a merger. With a merger, once you acquire the company disappears. And when many people think of buying a company, that's actually what they're thinking. I buy the company, like it comes into my company and the company disappears. In reality, what you're actually doing is you're merging the company into yours, or you're actually merging two companies into one. And your company is called the surviving company. Even in this method, there are ways to do it because think about it. We spoke about liabilities earlier. What if the company has liabilities that you don't want? Later in the series, this happens when Gavin forces Dinesh's hand to purchase the company, and you realize that he was purchasing a time bomb full of P-word violations of COPPA laws that he then had to find ways to try to get rid of. So you want to avoid stuff like that. And so what you can do is you still do the due diligence, of course, but there are many cases. In fact, there's a case I'm looking at right now, but there are many cases where you do your due diligence, and then after the merger has completed, you realize that one party withheld information that you couldn't have found on your own, and then it ends up in a lawsuit. So what you can do is you can do what's called a reverse triangular merger. This is one way to do it. This is how Facebook acquired WhatsApp. So what you do is you create an entity under your entity. Your entity owns that second entity completely. It's a wholly owned subsidiary. And then you merge that entity you've created with the entity you're trying to purchase. They now merge into one. And because you own that entity, then you end up owning the surviving entity. If you really think about it, what you could do is you could merge that entity into the second entity, and then the entity you formed is surviving one. But if the entity you're trying to purchase actually has maybe a good trademark or a good brand that the world already knows, that's the entity you want to survive. So what you do in that case is you do a reverse triangular merger. It's called a triangular merger because your entity is here. You're creating an entity under you, and then you're buying another entity, right? Create a triangle. Now, if you're doing a reverse triangular merger, like Facebook did with WhatsApp, then you create an entity under yourself, and then you merge this third entity that you're interested in into that entity. Well, your own entity ceases to exist, but then you own the new entity because, of course, the shares are merged, right? You're purchasing the shares of the other entity, and you've made all the other legal cleanups that you need to do. There are very legal ways to do it in the background that's not clear to the average person when they first start. But that's why I find this stuff interesting. All right, let's go to the next one.
Pull your head out of your ass, Richard. I'm offering you $4 million right now.
Another thing I need to mention here is the valuation. They're also debating the valuation of the company. And like I did in one of my previous videos, there's two ways to do this as well. There's a pre-money valuation, which is what is the company worth today? And then there's the post-money valuation, what is the company worth after I have put in that investment into the company. These two things matter. Now for Gavin Belson, it doesn't really matter because he's buying the whole company. So he doesn't really care. There's no real post-money valuation. He really cares about what the company is worth today. For Peter Gregory, however, it matters. And it's not really clear to investors usually at the beginning why it matters if they're new investors. But if they're trained investors that have done this over time, they understand why it matters. But you can watch the full video on pre-money versus post-money, but let me just give you a small example. So Peter is putting in 200K. Let's say he's putting in at a 2 million valuation, right? And that 2 million valuation is due to the back and forth he's had with Peter. And that's what happens in real life. You might think that the investor will get somebody that will review the company and like they'll get some technical numbers and find what the company is worth. And they do that in some cases. But what typically happens is that the investor and you, the starter founder, will go back and forth on what your company is worth. You'll give your side of the story. I have technology. I have the best team. And they'll give their side, but you don't have revenue. You haven't sold one thing yet. You haven't validated the idea. And at the end, after going back and forth based on the factors that you both have presented, you'll come to an agreement on what your company is worth. That's actually how it happens. Now, that number you guys come to an agreement on is what's called the pre-money valuation. The post-money valuation is then, now freeze frame. Let's take a step back. What you've actually agreed on, the value, is the net value of the assets of the company. So let's just say the value of the assets of your company, the technology and whatever cash you have left. Now, if you think about it, after the investor's money comes in though, then the value of your company increases. If you value your company at 2 million, the investor puts in 200K, then the value of the company is now 2.2 million. But if the investor said, okay, I'm going to buy 10% of a company for 200K, right? And you've set the value of the company at 2 million. So he buys 200K worth, that's 10%. And then he owns 10%. But then after his money is put into the company is now worth 2.2 million. He now owns less than 10%. Why? Because 10% of 2.2 million is what? It's 220,000. But he only has 200,000 worth of shares. That's why investors will go back and forth and say, what I actually want is 10% of the company after my money comes in. Post money, that's when I want to know I have 10% of the company. And so in essence, you're giving them a discount on pre-money valuation. So that's why pre-money versus post-money is important. And they don't really talk about it in the show, but that's one thing as a startup founder that you'll see even in safes and you should keep an eye out for. Depending on which side of the table you are, one of this works better for you than the other.
Next. Deposit?
Freeze. So there's a few things I want you to observe on this frame. Number one is that it's made out of Pied Piper Inc., incorporated, meaning it's supposed to be a corporation. Number two, however, is that they're using East Bank of Palo Alto. When you first think about these big, wealthy venture capital firms, you're thinking that they're using Bank of America, Chase Bank, the largest banks in the country. In real life, they use local Silicon Valley banks. And why is that? It's because, in my opinion, and from what I've seen in the industry, it's because these banks better understand what the venture capital world needs. They understand the transactions, they understand the compromises, the structures of the deal. So they're better partners for these kind of deals than the larger banks. So what you'll see is that in real life, if you have your pulse, your ear on the pulse of the industry, you would remember a couple of months ago when Silicon Valley Bank went under. Silicon Valley Bank is one of the largest banks, I think. 80% of Silicon Valley used Silicon Valley Bank before it went under. And now they're beginning to come back as well. I think someone bought them. So Silicon Valley was a big one. And then now there are others that are coming up after Silicon Valley Bank went under. But yeah, a lot of them use local banks. They don't use larger national banks.
Sorry. Hello?
Dude, they're taking your code apart.
What?
Yeah, did you give those programmer guys access to a player download or something?
Oh, shit. They probably hacked the prototype and decompiled the compression library.
Well, they've got it now, man. They're gonna reverse engineer a version as close as they can without getting sued.
Now, is this legal? Can they do this? And the answer is, it depends. There are 3 ways to protect your intellectual property, which is everything from the technology you have down to your trademark. Relevant to this, there are 2 ways. There's the copyright law, which simply covers everything that you ever create in terms of literary work. In this case, the code, the source code from which Pied Piper was built is actually protected. You don't need to file anything with anybody, with the USPTO or any other office. Once you create any original work of your own, it's automatically protected by law. Now, the downside with copyright law is that once somebody changes anything substantially, it no longer covers. In this case, what they're trying to do is go through it, find a way around it, and then build that instead of copying the source code directly. If they copy the source code directly, they can get sued, but they're smarter than that. So the smarter way to do this would be through patent law. Now, the downside of patent law is that you actually have to file for the patent, and it doesn't seem like Richard did that. And even if you do file for a patent, there are ways around that as well. You just have to create something that is distinguishable enough from the original. Patent law requires that you prove that the exact features you added into your patent, when you made the patent application, you added the features. Every one of those features are included in this new technology. The good thing is that it doesn't have to be one-to-one. So somebody copied it and then they changed something slight. That's not enough. They just have to do something very, very distinguishable. And that's why many people like Mark Cuban, for instance, don't believe in patents because, first of all, it's very easy to abuse. But secondly, at the end of the day, you still have to compete in the marketplace. The only real strategic advantage to a patent is to sue the hell out of somebody. In this case, that doesn't benefit Richard because he's not wealthy. But if you're a wealthy person and you have a patent, even if it's a frivolous lawsuit, you can file the lawsuit and hold somebody in court for a long period of time for no good reason. And that's what patent trolls do. We'll see that later in the series as well.
Sorry, dude, I can't be talking to you like this. Later.
Yeah. Nucleus.
Excuse me? This check is made out to Pied Piper Incorporated. Do you have an SS4?
A what?
Is Pied Piper a corporation registered with the IRS? I can't deposit that into a personal account.
I don't know. Is that something maybe you can help me with?
No, sir.
There's something very interesting she mentioned here. She said you have an SS4. And many people will gloss over this. But this is a very good lesson to startup founders and even some lawyers, because some lawyers, corporate lawyers, are not tax lawyers. When you are converting your entity, it turns out that if you have an LLC, for instance, you do not need to form a corporation afterwards if you want to turn the LLC into a corporation. That's one way to do it. You could file paperwork to convert it with the state, but you don't actually have to do that. It turns out you can do it with a click of a button. Okay, let me show you. I have an example here. I created one based on Pied Piper itself. So let's take a look at this. This is the form SS4 she was talking about. This is an IRS form. And what this does is it basically creates an EIN. And if we go through this, you'll see, put the name of the entity here, Pied Piper Inc. I put the address here, the second address here, and here, responsible parties, Richard Hendricks. This will be the name of the CEO or whoever is responsible, whoever has the authority from the company to act on their behalf. And then here you put their SSN here of this person. This is required, by the way. We scroll down here, and the important part is right here, type of entity. So if you're a partnership or you're an LLC, you can see there's no LLC here because LLCs are taxed as partnerships. Now, if you are an LLC, this would be selected. But to convert your LLC into a corporation for tax purposes now, that's with the IRS. You literally just have to remove this and put this here. That's all. And once that's done, they'll tax you as a corporation. Now, the downside of being taxed as a corporation is that you have double taxation. Whatever revenue you make in the company, it's taxed at that level. And then when the company distributes that income back to you, you get personally taxed as well. That's why people prefer LLCs. They have a direct taxation. The money comes in and you're taxed directly. Believe it or not, that's also the downside, though, of an LLC. Because think about it. If the money comes in, but you want to reinvest all that money back into the company, the IRS doesn't care. They don't give a crap. You have to pay taxes on that money. And so the advantage of a corporation is when the money comes in and you pay that corporate taxes, the rest of the money stays in there. You personally, as an individual, don't have any tax bill because you did not make any money, right? You pay the taxes on the money when you actually have the money. But in the case of an LLC, you don't have the money. You invested everything back into the company, but the IRS doesn't care. You made money, so you have to pay them. Now, of course, talk to your tax advisor if you want to do this, but this is one option. So you just put it there and you put the name of the state where the entity is in, and then you state why. So if you see here, I have corporation selected. If this was changing from an LLC to corporation, then you just select this here and put corporation. But if not, if this was new, then you just put banking purposes and then you can delete this here. You put the accounting year, what month you use to close your accounting year. If it's an attorney doing it, they'll put their information here and put their information here and then send you this to sign. Now, the reason they'll need this is to be able to act on your behalf. The IRS allows you to do this directly. You can do this in 5 minutes on your own without needing an attorney. In that case, you will need this last document here. But if an attorney is doing it on your behalf, you'll need to sign something like this that states you've given them authority to act on your behalf. And then you sign it and that's it. So that's the SS4. All right, so this is all interesting stuff. In my coming videos, I'm gonna do more stuff about their incorporation. They go to incorporate and realize that there's already a company with that name. That in of itself has a lot of questions, because then how did you sell 5 or 10% of the company if the company doesn't exist, right? So that's a different question. And then we'll also talk about the COPA violations when Gavin Belson strong-armed Dinesh into selling the whole company to him. But at the end of the day, realized that he bought a lot of crap with what he bought. So we're going to talk about that and how that would have been resolved. And in there as well, there's very curious moments where they could have at least mitigated a lot of the damage and they didn't. So we'll talk about that in coming videos. If you want to see that, subscribe to the channel and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.